So could this silent killer be rearing its ugly head in the Libyan war? And if so, what would be the toxic toll on the people there? For more, we turn to Hallinan in Berkeley, California. He's a columnist with Foreign Policy in Focus. Thank you so much for being on this program. Now, as dangerous as these weapons are, I do want to talk about the fact that they have this incredible penetrating power. And given their effectiveness and their historic use in Iraq and Kosovo, do you think it's possible that these weapons could essentially be used in Libya also?
Oh, they're almost certainly being used in Libya. If you examine some of the entrance wounds on some of the tanks, on some of the T-72s that I've seen, they're classic depleted uranium ammunition wounds, relatively small holes, and then exploded outward, because when the DUA goes inside the tank, it explodes into a fireball of about 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what produces all the dust and the stuff that blows all over the place and gets on people's clothes and they breathe in, etc.
But I thought this was supposed to be a humanitarian intervention, right? We're there to protect the people. I mean, what does it say about this country and the NATO allies if we're essentially going in to protect the Libyans but using something that is so devastatingly dangerous to human life?
Well, it really should be banned. I mean, this depleted uranium ammunition is really in the category of poison gas or dum-dum bullets. It's the kind of weapon that really should come under the Geneva Conventions, because not only is it radioactive, that is, not only can you breathe it in and therefore it produces bone marrow changes and chromosomal changes and that kind of thing. Uranium is extremely toxic metal. Uranium DUA rounds go very deep into the ground because they're so heavy. They there get into, according to the World Health Organization, they get into the water tables. And so people are drinking this stuff. It destroys kidneys, it destroys livers. It's just very dangerous stuff.
Well, you mentioned the Geneva Convention, and I know that you yourself have written about the fact that a UN panel has actually found that these kinds of weapons violate several international agreements, including the UN Charter, Geneva Conventions, other agreements. What has gotten in the way of these weapons being banned? I mean, are they so useful that we can't possibly find anything else to use in their stead? I have a hard time believing that.
Well, what they are is they are very effective, and the United States also has a tremendous pile of depleted uranium because they have a very large nuclear industry. Now, what do you do with this stuff? Well, one of the things you can do is you turn it into these cannon shells, and they 25 millimeter, 30 millimeter, and tank shells and all sorts of things. They're very effective. They're very effective, and we trade them. Most of our NATO allies use them. Italy does not. Germany does not. Belgium is the only country in the world that's officially banned it. But we've been peddling this stuff, and we're not only peddling it, we're going to expand it. We're going to start moving it now to the use by heavy machine guns and even some submachine guns. So we're going to find depleted uranium just saturating battlefields in the future. It's just a very, very bad idea.
Now, I know it's like comparing apples and oranges when we talk about depleted uranium weapons and nuclear weapons. They're completely separate things. But from a big picture perspective, does this sort of undermine America's push to wean the world off of its nuclear weapons? And does it say something about our inability to essentially convince people that we mean what we say when we talk about certain dangers that are facing us?
Well, I think it does. I mean, I think if we're pushing, for instance, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement, and we're presently, have these sanctions against Iran, we have sanctions against North Korea, and at the same time that we're using nuclear materials in warfare, I think most people in the world look at that and they see hypocrisy. So I think that politically it's a bad idea. I know that medically it's an extremely bad idea, and it's just one of those things that an effective weapon that you have to step away from because the price that you pay for it in the end is simply too high.
And very briefly, I know that you've written about the historic use of these weapons in places like Kosovo and Iraq. DU ammunition weapons our own government insisted that it was perfectly safe, that there were no medical consequences as a result of its use, yet it's been linked to Gulf War syndrome. Talk a little bit about the medical consequences here.
Well, actually, they don't say that. It's just that they don't tell anyone what they're saying. The U.S. Army back in 1991 did a study of depleted uranium ammunition. And what they concluded was that anyone who did any cleanup in the period after, say, dragged away an armored vehicle that was struck with depleted uranium ammunition, should be wearing a full biohazard suit, and that all clothing afterwards should be destroyed. The tanks that they bought back from the Gulf War that were struck by depleted uranium ammunition friendly fire, they were buried in radioactive dumps. So actually, the Army knew that the stuff was dangerous. What they didn't do was they didn't tell anybody that it was dangerous. And that's still the situation today.
Well, still the situation today. And we're also not telling anyone whether we're actually using this stuff or not. Really unfortunate developments there. Thank you so much for your time. That was